what he's trying to get out of doing that. So that segues perfectly into somebody else we're going to talk about that can't seem to understand how things work, and that's Kevin Durant. So Kevin Durant asked for a trade on Thursday, which, first of all, I'm putting my conspiracy hat on. He does it on the day of free agency, the day that free agency opens. Like, you decide to. It's kind of an Aaron Rodgers.
What kind of conspiracy? What do you mean?
I mean, it's kind of an Aaron Rodgers situation where they released that on the day of the draft. You know, they released last year where Aaron Rodgers wanted, you know, I don't know if he wanted to be traded or he didn't want to play anymore. I don't, you know, whatever. And so it's just kind of like, I don't know what the conspiracy would be, but it seems like an awfully big attention grab. And, you know, they've already got Kyrie Irving, who loves to get attention. You know, he loves.
Yeah, I mean, well, it kind of, maybe it shows poor judgment on Kevin Durant's part, but I mean, you know, he's the one who went to Brooklyn without talking to anybody about it, so you know.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into that. So
do you want to talk about the Nets first, like before we get into the free agency stuff and who's going to be traded? And all that
absolutely.
Stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't want to do that thing where a debate show would go, well, whose fault is it for Brooklyn? It's obviously everybody's fault. It's Kyrie Irving's fault, it's Kevin Durant's fault, and it's the Nets organization's fault. Because basically, no matter what way you look at this, the Brooklyn thing's done.
Right.
They're not going to – they won one playoff series. They're not going to win a championship. They're not going to win one championship, much less multiple championships. Right. So this thing has failed. This is obviously a disaster of epic proportions. I mean, in terms of super teams. I mean, I'm trying to think of other super teams that were this much of a disaster. I mean, you know, it's hard to really. I mean, the Nets. The previous incarnation of a Nets sort of super team was Paul Pierce and Garnett and ISO Joe and like whoever else, and they didn't. I think they won a playoff series, but they didn't really do much. I'm trying to think of other super teams that were like a massive disappointment. I mean, maybe the Lakers with Dwight and Steve Nash, but everybody got injured, so it was kind of like
Lakers, Dwight and Steve Nash. The Lakers where they added Gary Payton and Karl Malone. The Houston Rockets where they tried to get Barkley and Pippen and Olajuwon together.
But some of those were like really short-lived, and it was kind of an injury, and it derailed everything. This went on for a few years, and it was all kinds of BS that went on, you know. I mean, in terms of, you know, first of all, they don't meet with the organization. They decide to go there, and it's like, okay, Kevin Durant's like, if you want me, then you're bringing Kyrie along. And it's like, okay, dude, really? You got to play with Kyrie Irving? I mean, by that point when they teamed up, he'd already been injured a bunch. And I think at that point we already knew that he had maybe sort of tacitly agreed with the idea that the Earth was flat. So we were kind of like, okay, this guy's a little, you know. And he had been in Boston, and the whole Boston thing had kind of blown up, and we thought that should be like a championship team, and it clearly wasn't. I mean, they made the conference finals without Kyrie Irving. So anyway, they start off, they don't even meet with the team. They just go there. And then Kyrie Irving's like, yeah, we don't even need a coach. And it's like, what, you know, and then they bring in DeAndre. They say, yeah, you got to bring in DeAndre Jordan, who at that point was basically done, and you got to pay him like $10 million a year. Like, what, you know, so you got to do that. We don't need a coach. And Durant wanted Steve Nash because Steve Nash and him had developed a relationship when Steve Nash was like an advisor to the Warriors when Durant was in Golden State. Which, it's like, okay, fine. You want a first-time head coach who, look, Steve Nash is a Hall of Famer. He's a great player. I don't know if he's a good coach or not. I mean, for the past 2 years, he hasn't really, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, and then I'm trying to, obviously, what else? Kyrie went on sabbatical that one time. Of course, he didn't get vaccinated. He didn't play in a bunch of games. His availability was in question, you know. So people are like, well, you got to blame Kyrie for the whole thing. And it's like, Well, no, I blame Kyrie significantly. I mean, because he wasn't available, not just because of injury, but because of whatever the hell was going on with him and him deciding to not get vaccinated. You know, but I blame Durant because it's like, you teamed up with this guy. You
Right.
wanted Steve Nash as your coach. Like, what are you, I mean, are you going to be a leader and be like, dude, Kyrie, you got to come play. Like, if you don't play, James Harden's going to leave. You know, I mean, Kyrie Irving, that torpedoed the whole team because he ended up, that resulted in James Harden leaving the team. And then, of course, the Nets organization just sort of empowering both Durant and Kyrie to just sort of do whatever the hell they wanted, it seems like. You know, and you with those guys aren't leaders, so you didn't have a leader on the team. And then, of course, you had built a culture there, and then you traded everybody away. And Ryan Russillo made a great point. He's like, everybody was saying, well, they shouldn't have blown up their team. That team was 42-40 before they got Durant and Kyrie. Any GM would have been stupid to not try to get those two players in there. Okay? Yeah. But you blew up that culture, and then you didn't replace it with anything. You didn't have a strong personality as a head coach. You didn't have a player on there who was a leader. So the whole thing was a mess. And then Durant kept getting hurt, you know. Harden kept getting hurt. Kyrie got hurt several times, and plus he had his whole issues with, I'm not going to play this. I'm not going to play for the next couple weeks or whatever it was, or I'm not going to be able to play in home games because of the vaccine mandate, and I refuse to get vaccinated. So yeah, I mean, overall, the entire thing has just been a complete disaster, and it's, you know, everyone involved doesn't have anybody to blame but themselves. They've all played a role in why this completely blew up.
Yeah, and the thing that I think basically set this on a path to destruction, or one of the thing that the point of no return for me was the James Harden move. Once they did that move, they were basically stuck. And basically, if that did not work out, that torpedoed any chance they had to do anything, because they had to give up basically all the picks that they have left. Yep. And once they tried that, and by the way, it's one of those things that looked like it was going to work.
That's what's so crazy. I mean, literally, if like Harden didn't get hurt or Kyrie didn't get hurt, they probably would have at least made the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, I don't know. They probably would have made the finals, and then you get to the finals, you see what happens. But yeah, that's one of those crazy things that it's like, for as crazy as Kyrie is, and as many injuries as they had, and the lack of a culture and the lack of leadership and whatever else, they almost made the Eastern Conference. They literally almost won the championship. So if they had won one, I mean, I guess you would say it's a success. But I think that they were kind of thinking they could win, more than one. But yeah, that is pretty crazy.
And so, yeah, I just think my overall take on this from the beginning was that I think Kevin Durant deserves more blame than he's going to get. Listen, right. I realize that, a lot of people gave Durant a hard time for going to Golden State. Oh, you're going to a stacked team. You're taking the easy route, blah, 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 blah. That same stuff. But to me, it's like so he played for Golden State. He saw what a good franchise looks like. He saw what it looks like when there's a place that's well run, that has a good culture. They have a certain way that they operate from the top down. He saw that and was like, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm going to go to this team that has no history of anything really, because they're basically brand new. They had a new owner and, a new owner, new GM, the whole deal. And so, yeah, I think we have to. This is the point where it's like, in my opinion, Kevin Durant, what the hell are you doing? Like you chose this lunatic way of doing things, and instead, I think there's a immediate reaction from some people like, well, he doesn't want to play with Kyrie anymore. Well, that's not what I've been told is that.
Well, that's what we're starting to find out, that he still wants to play with Kyrie Irving somewhere else, and I'm just like, dude, really?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, he's still. I feel like Kevin Durant is still of the mind where, well, they didn't try hard enough to understand Kyrie.
Yeah, because he said they didn't, and it's just like, dude, really?
Yeah. So you You go there, okay? They have no history of anything. You don't meet with them beforehand to figure it out, just like you said, right? You get the coach fired initially. Kenny Atkinson's there. They like him. They have a nice team. They have nice pieces. You're like, no, we don't want this guy. You choose the coach. You make them give up all that stuff to get James Harden. Then you want James Harden gone. And now you're going to leave, and now you're like, no, I've got 4 years left. You're asking for a trade, and you're literally going to act like you're washing your hands of it. Like, oh, well, this has nothing to do with me. So that's where I have a problem with. Like, yes, the Nets front office deserve blame. Yes, I understand that. I agree with it. But to me, this is, and you can complain, well, they shouldn't have given him that much power, and the organization should have done their own thing. That's really hard to do. Just like you said, that's tough to do. When these great players want to come to your team, it's your job to make the team better. What is the general manager supposed to do? Not have them on his team? I
mean, and look, like we said, if Harden didn't get hurt or Kyrie Irving didn't get hurt against the Bucks, maybe they probably win that series, and then they probably at least make the Eastern Conference Finals, and they might have made the finals, and then who knows? So. Yeah. We're it's this crazy thing where we're like, we can talk about all these mistakes they made along the way, and it almost worked. So,
Yeah, I think it's awfully disingenuous. Like, listen, I get, yes, Kevin Durant can ask for a trade if he wants to. If he's like, oh, this is like Colin Cowherd saying, well, this is an easy decision. You're just like, you know what, I'm out of here. I don't blame him for wanting to leave Brooklyn. It's like, yeah, I get that, and I understand. Like, I have no problem with that. It's all right. That's what you want to do now. But you still should get some blame for getting yourself into this situation. Nobody created this situation but you. This wasn't forced upon you. Nobody made you do this stuff. Like, you chose this. So now to come out, release, he hasn't talked to anybody. Just have it come out through the media that, oh, well, I want to be traded. And then he put out some cryptic tweet about those who were in the gym with me know what I'm about, blah, blah, blah. It's like, now you're starting to sound like Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
So, listen.
His whole thing is he's like, I'm just about basketball. And it's like, okay, because, when you play, you just go out there and you play really well. But, when you just say I'm only about basketball, it's like, well, yeah, the going out on the court and the stuff you physically do on the court is important, but, there's a lot of other things that go into it in terms of leadership, in terms of having a good culture with the team, in terms of having some level of continuity, in terms of playing together enough to where you know what this guy's going to do, you know what this guy's going to do, you know how you handle different kinds of plays and different kinds of situations, and so I'm all about ball. It's like, well, dude, you can't just roll the ball out there on the court and then expect to win games. That's not. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah, and by the way, it's not true. You're not all about basketball. If you were all about basketball, you would have stayed in Golden State. If you were all about basketball, don't give me that. It's nonsense. You wanted to go to New York for your business interests, which is fine. You wanted to live in Brooklyn. That's okay. I have no issue with that whatsoever. But then you can't come back and act like, oh, the organization failed me. It's like, you chose this. Like, you could have gone anywhere you wanted. And this is what you decided to do. So when it blows up, yes, I'm going to put some blame on you. Because...
Well, second of all, even if the organization had taken more time to understand Kyrie Irving, understanding wouldn't have fixed the fact that he couldn't play because he was unvaccinated.
Right.
So,
it wouldn't have fixed the fact that James Harden was completely turned off after Kyrie pulled that nonsense. And so that...
Well, because... And I saw... I can't remember who it was. It was an NBA reporter on ESPN talking about sort of the tipping point for him was the Nets were like the number one seed in the Eastern Conference this year. They beat the crap out of the Chicago Bulls, and everybody was like, wow. And it was just Durant and James Harden. And so, I think, I don't remember if Kyrie had played. I don't know if they were letting him play road games yet. But anyway, the reporter was just saying that, they were at the press conference after the game. James Harden was like, "Hell, I'll give Kyrie Irving the vaccine myself," because he's thinking, okay, if we bring Kyrie into this, we're going to win the championship. Like, we're really good. And they were really good, for like the first half of the season. Then, of course, Durant gets hurt, and that kind of changes things. But, yeah, so it was just like Kyrie Irving, like, you caused James Harden to leave. Because if you guys were winning, you probably would have been like, all right, let's stay here, let's ride this thing out. Because when you're winning kind of cures everything. So, yeah, that's kind of Kyrie's fault. But again, Durant, you picked this. So,
well, and it's interesting.
If you wanted to leave Golden State, there were other teams you could have gone to.
Right. It's really interesting that Brooklyn has had 4 of the most confusing, different, think outside the box, weird players that we've had in the NBA in the last 20 years, right? They've had Durant, Irving, James Harden, and now they have Ben Simmons. Like,
yeah,
it's pretty crazy that's what this is. And, so they do all that, and it's like, and then Kyrie opts in. It's like, so I just have a thought, like, you couldn't have brought it back one more year and given it a try? Like,
yeah,
you did all
Kyrie
this.
would have been able to play a sense. I mean, because wait a minute. When they first went there, it was just the two of them.
Right.
It wasn't Harden, because when they first went there, I remember I originally thought that they're not going to win the championship because they didn't have. Then they got Harden and they started playing well, and I was like, okay, I can kind of see it now. But at the beginning, it was just you two, and you still have Steve Nash as the coach. Like, it's your guys' thing. You don't want to give this another shot. Like, now Kyrie can probably play the whole year. So like what?
Yeah, you did all this upheaval to get to this point, and now you're going to dip. It's like,
yeah.
Bro. Like, what are you doing? So, anyway.